Alrighty, folks. James Hansen here. I am the Libertarian nominee for U.S. Senate. Now, I did not qualify for last night's debate held at UVU. I was a few votes, 7 votes shy in the uh, survey conducted by the Utah Debate Commission of qualifying for that stage. But I did want to go ahead and respond to each of the questions posed by Mr. Wright and let you have an option to hear a third option that is going to be on the ballot this fall. So the first question from Mr. Wright, I'll go ahead and play that.
Many Utahns would probably say, if asked, that they support states' rights and that is very important. But ultimately, they want the federal government to do good things with the money we send back to Washington. If elected, what one good thing would you really focus on, would you do to help the federal government bring something good to Utah? And this goes to Mr. McMullen first.
Okay, so the question's been asked, what is one thing you would focus on at the federal level that would help Utahns? Mr. Lee talks about reining in federal spending and brings up inflation. And Mr. McMullen talks about partisan politics and how he would not be beholden to any party and would be able to get things done for Utah. Again, not specifically naming anything, which is kind of something he's really good at, is just saying stuff and not actually saying anything of substance. I want to build off of what Mr. Lee said. How do we tackle spending and inflation? So many politicians pay lip service to that. I want to tackle inflation. I want to tackle spending. Evan McMullen, multiple times in this debate, talked about reining in excessive federal spending or reckless. That's what he uses the word, reckless federal spending. What does that mean? What specifically are you going to talk about cutting? Again, we don't get specifics from either of these men, but I want to talk specifically what I would tackle at the federal level that would rein in this reckless spending and help with inflation, and that is our foreign policy. American foreign policy has been focused on advancing the geopolitical interests of the military-industrial complex and their economy. We are the number one exporter of arms and weaponry in the world, many, many times more than any other nation. And to me, that is immoral. 5% of our GDP is driven by conflict, arms sales and weapons sales. And when we focus on economics and geopolitical power above peace and stability, we are saying that the lives of people in these conflict zones are worth less than our bank accounts, are worth less than our influence on the world sphere. Okay? We need to focus on peace. And how will that benefit Utahns? When we reduce the defense budget, which is in excess of $800 billion, and with the Ukraine spending this year is probably pushing $1 trillion in this fiscal year. When we reduce that spending, that reduces our tax burden and that reduces inflation. When the government prints endless amounts of money to finance everything they're doing, that creates inflation. And it's not making me richer. It's not making any normal person here in Utah richer. It's robbing us. We're being robbed as the value of our dollar becomes less. We're being robbed as the cost of goods skyrockets. Mr. Lee mentioned multiple times tonight, the average household's monthly cost of living has increased nearly $1,000. Okay. Now, to people up at the top, maybe that's not something they care about. But to the millions of Americans across the nation, here in the state of Utah, that's a huge amount of money. To school teachers like me, to any normal Jane or Joe living here in the state, that's a big deal. When we reduce our defense budget, when we reduce the conflict that we are financing, we are subsidizing with federal tax dollars, billions of dollars of weapons every year to Israel. That bill was co-sponsored by Mike Lee. Billions of dollars to Saudi Arabia, which they have used in a civil war against the Yemenis people and killed over 400,000 civilians. billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine. And while I agree that Putin attacking Ukraine is an aggressive and awful thing, I don't believe the only solution can be dumping billions of dollars into the area if we are not advocating for peace, if we are not looking at the choices we made in the past uh, in that area and acknowledging some missteps and doing our best to correct those, to make peace with Russia, just as we did after during the Cuban Missile Crisis, taking arms and troops out of countries right on Russia's doorstep, such as Turkey. Uh, if we are not doing everything we can to make peace for those Ukrainians so that less civilians will die, less civilians will be displaced, we are failing as our duty on the world stage. Our number one focus in foreign policy should be peace and stability. And if we do that, if we pursue that, we can shrink our defense budget, we can reduce the amount of conflicts on the world stage, and Utahns can go to bed at night, A, suffering less effects of inflation and shortages, and B, and most importantly in my mind, they can go to bed at night knowing that we are not financing and causing suffering, death, displacement, and trauma to millions of people around the globe.